Well, welcome back to BCB Live. We have none other. You know what, Drive Safe? This is not the same guy. I take it back.
Oh, yeah.
This is he's
There's
senior vice president, not just vice president, senior vice president of government affairs and safety. You know what? We celebrate things like that here on BCB Live. Congrats, brother.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's good. Thank you for having me on. It's good to be here, and certainly, without a doubt, I appreciate the accolades.
You know what? Very well deserved for certain.
Absolutely.
You've been with the Truckload Carrier Association since what, 2005-ish? Does that sound right?
That sounds about right. Yeah, 17 years or so. I know. Again, nobody told me there'd be math this morning, but yeah.
Hey, so let's just get into that. So you began in 2005. We'll just go with that. You know, what's changed for you since, say, when you walked into where you are today as senior vice president? And seriously, congratulations on that.
Thank you. You know, in terms of TCA, a lot has changed since I walked into the door 17 years ago. First and foremost being government affairs in its entirety, right? Years ago, we stayed in our lane, very rarely went down on Capitol Hill, and nowadays I'm down there talking with congressmen, senators, or representatives talking about the issues that affect the truckload segment of the industry. So that's done a whole 180, if you will, bringing government affairs to TCA and making sure the truckload voice is heard on issues like parking, infrastructure, direct alcohol testing, hours of service, and just generally making the life of a professional truck driver better is what we try to ring in on. So it's been a great 17 years without a doubt. I've certainly, loved everything I do for the industry, getting the chance. I know you guys make a joke coming on here, but this is my third time coming on, and I guess I'm a glutton for punishment, but at the same point.
Yeah, well-deserved too. That's also well-deserved.
Hey, you hold the record. You know what? We got a plaque up here with your name on it. Holds the record for returning guest.
Yeah, good stuff.
I'm just gonna have to keep coming, so I hold that record.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about Capitol Hill. A lot's going on. Obviously, we'll start with, I want to start with, I mentioned it to you a little bit earlier, I want to start with the infrastructure bill, how the states are being allocated money for to improvement of where is the money for the truck drivers? Where is the money going to come from for the truck drivers?
Well, we're looking under your mattress, Dave, and your mattress too, Rick, to see if it's actually there. But this is a big question, right? Is infrastructure gave dollars to the states for their road programs and bridge programs and inevitably truck parking, and it gets filed under basically what's called discretionary funding at the state level. Well, the issue with discretionary funding is they get to pick and choose what projects are the most important to the states. Infrastructure got done a year ago, and a lot has happened in a year since it got done. We have all these talks on inflation. We have all these talks about paying at the pump and talks about the rise in cost of goods sold. But the same thing can be said about building roads and bridges. Those costs have gone up, and you're starting to look at these discretionary dollars that got passed the states through the infrastructure bill, and the states are suddenly having to come up with a hard choice, not just between roads, bridges, and truck parking, but actually what roads and what bridges really need to get fixed, because the construction prices have increased so dramatically just in fuel alone to get these projects done that they're falling short of the original goal of what they had set prior to getting this infrastructure bill done. So it's a really catch-22 right now, and they're certainly looking at it and saying, we've got some problems here because dollars have gone up in terms of cost. Projects still remain the same and still need to get done, but they're going to focus on the most needed or shovel-ready type of projects to start off with, which becomes where does truck parking or those dollars for truck parking fit in, and that becomes the biggest issue.
Yeah, and that's a state-to-state thing. I mean, where does the funding come from, Dave? Because we still haven't seen it around here. It's still, when you listen to, the A-Tree, you see the truck drivers that we talk to, the biggest issue still remains truck parking. Dave, is there anything going to happen in the next 12 months to alleviate any of that? I mean, this money that's coming in, discretionary, I'm right with you. I mean, I have a hard time seeing it's going to go for concrete when it's going to, with the cost of inflation coming in now, it's going to cost a lot more money to fix the bridges than we thought a couple of years ago.
Well, yeah, and is there anything coming up that we can do something on truck parking? That becomes the biggest question is, generally speaking right now, with midterm elections in November coming up, so you're kind of at a stalemate in Congress right now. However, it is appropriation season. And when appropriation season happens, there's a lot of funding that gets pushed forward So it dictates how they spend that money for the next year or years to come. So in saying that, there have been conversations right now that I'm involved in. I know a lot of our friends on Capitol Hill are starting to talk about dedicated funding towards improving the truck parking situation and getting that into the appropriations mark, if you will, or the original text rather than an amendment, which is the traditional source. But getting this into the base bill and start putting that forward, I think everybody can get behind the issue of truck parking, and we're hoping this is not one of those things that dies on the vine going into midterms. Because generally speaking, when you're in a midterm election year, you don't want to give the other side something to claim victory over. This is not just a Democratic or Republican playbook. It's both sides, and they'll both say the same thing. And with a midterm elections being so hotly contested at this point in time, that becomes the key thing. So can they get it in? Is there an appetite to get it in? I know there was a BOST bill that got introduced last year that called for $775 million over 5 years to help solve this problem. And I don't know if it truly solves it, but it certainly puts a big dent in it.
Are they gonna be able to do this on a bill? Are they gonna have to move this in, and are they gonna have to add this to pork? Are they gonna have to add this attach this to something else? Is that the best way we're gonna see this happen? Is it actually attached to another bill?
Yeah. Nothing gets done alone these days in DC. It has to get attached to something much bigger. And with the approach bill being such a large omni-type piece of legislation, certainly that's the vehicle that moves forward with it. And that's probably the only large piece of legislation that we're looking at moving forward until after midterm elections. So that becomes the biggest issue is that's the vehicle, right? And those conversations are happening now. We'll probably have some sort of base appropriations bill introduced shortly that will dedicate those fundings towards how every dollar is spent, not just truck parking. And we're looking to get those truck parking dollars in there.
What's the sentiment on the Hill on this issue itself? I mean, I know you're up there, you're educating lawmakers, you're trying to go in and speak the talk and help them to understand the seriousness and the dangers of what we're dealing with in regards to truck parking. What's the sentiment on the Hill in regards to truck parking?
Well, and good news, right? This is an issue that everybody can get behind. I don't think there's been a congressman, senator, or representative that has sat there and said, truck parking, that's not an issue whatsoever. I think everybody can actually get behind it and say, yeah, we need a place to park these trucks, because guess what? They're getting complaints from their constituents saying trucks are parking on on-ramps, trucks are parking on off-ramps, trucks are parking on places that are not designed to park a truck. And that just exacerbates the problem and puts Congress at a position saying we need to do something to fix it. So whether you're Democrat or Republican, I think they'll all agree that there is a need to do something. Now, again, need and want and actuality are sometimes different on Capitol Hill, and whether that gets done or not remains to be seen, but I think everybody is getting behind it.
Hey, the Biden administration announced $463.5 million allocated for the mixup program. It's administered by the Federal Motor Carrier to help prevent truck crashes, a 52% increase from 2021. Talk to us a little bit through that, if you could.
Well, mixup funding is funding, again, that goes directly to the states. It's gone to improve safety on the roadways. So, off the top of my head, think of maybe enforcement officers, right, to help that CSA or data queue issue, or think road work to actually expand existing lanes on existing highways. So these are the funding that goes to that and helps improve the safety aspect of our roadways. You get another enforcement officer to do more safety inspections at way stations and truck stops, if you will, where they're pulling over to actually look at the trucks. That's what these dollars are going for. So mixup funding is certainly dedicated funding that the federal government gives to every state. Well, I believe most states, actually, and most states will have the luxury of doing certain things with it, like in the enforcement perspective for safety improvement purposes, or making safety improvements to their infrastructure within the confines of their state.
Yeah, Texas by far receiving the most is what it says, followed by California and then Florida. So, definitely, and again, it's there, they say, and again, Drive Safe Dave and I had our own little argument over this truck safety between 2021 and 2020, but it's in there in the article that I was reading, says because the increase in trucking fatalities, but there were also a lot more miles driven in 2021 than 2020, in which I'll just say this, the fatality per mile driven went down over 21 through 20.
Yeah, and certainly it's one of those things that we as an industry have to acknowledge and look into. And I know myself, I have conversations with carriers on a daily basis about their dedication to improving their safety numbers. And these are carriers that are already viewed as the safest carriers in the country. The ultimate goal is to not get into an accident. It's let's deliver freight, let's do so from point A to point B and do so safely. That's kind of the carrier mantra, if you will, that operates on our roadways. I've never met a driver that ever wants to get into an accident. That just doesn't happen.
Thank you.
So in saying that, this is where we are as an industry. We're trying to improve on a daily basis by any means possible.
And let's add to that. I'm just curious. I know here in Texas we helped tort reform here in the state of Texas in regards to litigation. I'm just wondering, federally, on a federal level up there on the Hill, are you hearing any movement towards tort reform in regards to these nuclear verdicts or anything like that?
Unfortunately, this tort reform is one of those issues that's really a state-driven issue. So you talk about the success in Texas, which, again, great success, great win. One of these things that can be viewed as a blueprint for every state across the country, if you will. And tort reform really goes state by state because a lot of these cases are settled at the state level and very rarely get to that federal court level. So it's not being viewed as a federal issue. It is being viewed as every state in the country, all 50 of them, certainly have improvements they can make. The seatbelt gag order being lifted, things of that nature, without a doubt become that biggest issue. So it's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to dealing with tort reform, and certainly there are improvements probably at every state, and there have been success stories in recent years. Texas, Louisiana, name another one off the top of my head. So without a doubt, they are growing, and the movement is there. The appetite to get something done on tort reform certainly is very real at this point in time.
So let's discuss the one hot topic going on right now: speed limiters. That's obviously something that's been bounced around a lot. Why don't you go into what's going on the Hill on that regard?
Well, FMCSA issued its notice of intent or advanced supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking. A lot of letters in there. And what was interesting about this is they really put it in a phrase that they haven't put a speed out there in which they limit trucks at. They've just kind of said, hey, tell us what you're limited at, tell us what your thoughts of speed limiters are, but we're reluctant to publish how we would want to limit speeds at. And certainly it's been a popular rulemaking. We've got probably over 15,000 comments submitted in the docket last time I checked. And at 15,000 comments, that's a lot of work for people who have to read those comments every day. And those comments could be submitted on letterhead could be submitted on a cocktail napkin, and knowing you two is probably coming on the cocktail napkin. But at the same point,
oh yes,
they're looking at everything that gets submitted, and this is on a rule that has yet to really determine what those speeds are going to be limited. I can tell you in the conversations that I've had with our carriers, there is a lot of flexibility now in these types of speed limiter type of programs. And by flexibility, I mean you can set your speed limiter at, say, 70 miles an hour. And give additional bumps to allow for passing for a certain amount of time during that frame. It's a far cry from where we were years ago. It's a far cry from what that set it and forget it. I even was familiar with technology at our safety division meeting that we had in Nashville a couple weeks ago that actually was flexible in terms of adjusting speed limits, the speed limiter to where they were driving on a road. So if they're in a road that had a 25 mile an hour speed limit, guess what? That limiter adjusts to 25 miles per hour.
Wow.
The technology has grown by leaps and bounds, just like everything technology in trucks. And heck, technology has grown so that us three can sit here and do this podcast on a daily basis if we want to.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
This is where it's at. There's so much flexibility built into these types of programs nowadays that the federal government has the unenviable position of reading 15,000 plus comments and trying to figure out for its supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking about what they do want to limit speeds at. So this is our first round. There's going to be another round of language that they're going to hit the Federal Register, and people are going to comment on those until we actually get a final rule. So again, this is not going to be done tomorrow. This will be done months, maybe years from now, but certainly one of those aspects that they're kicking the tires on.
I know that the speed limiters that, in general, it's meant for a safety aspect on that. However, with fuel, with diesel, the price that it is today, I think it makes carriers, small and large, look at it a little different as well. I'm curious to see, what are your thoughts? You think some philosophies, some thought process will change from when we first started this, the comment section to the next comment section with the price of diesel staying at $5.85, $5.90 a gallon.
Yeah, the fuel savings always creeps into this discussion, and with that fuel savings always is going to be, well, does FMCSA really have authority over getting trucks to save on fuel? Isn't that really an EPA thing? And that becomes that big question. And that's the thing, that was one of the side benefits when speed limiters first came out, is they've long been viewed as a safety improvement piece of technology. And then when fuel creeps up, all of a sudden they say, oh, it's a fuel cost savings piece of technology instead. So that becomes the big question. Rick, I'm like you. I don't drive over 55 miles an hour, so I get the old gas all the time.
You said that with a straight face.
They're just a couple of law-abiding citizens driving safe, Dave.
Yeah, I said that with a straight face.
So just kind of is like, you just sit there and, that's where it's at, and speed limiters certainly play a role in fuel cost savings. There's no doubt about that. It's been proven time and time again. But certainly at this point in time, it's being viewed as a speed limiting device and a safety improvement device.
I think we've covered a lot of things going on the Hill. Is there anything that y'all are actively working on other than what we've already discussed that you may want to bring up and mention to us up there that we might be interested in or might want to know about that we have not yet discussed?
Obviously some of the things we're working on affect the supply chain crisis, and I think that's kind of old news, but at the same point, those problems are still around. We're working on issues or encouraging communication between shipper, carrier, customer, if you will, so that they can get the trucks in and out and moving in a timely fashion. We continue to talk on flexibility on hours of service. You've got a professional truck driver that is averaging about 6.5 hours of drive time per day, of which probably an hour of that is actively looking for safe and secure truck parking. So they're really not advancing the load in some of those hours that are attributed to the drive time. So what are we doing as a nation, as an industry, to, number one, make the professional lives of the truck driver easier, and number two, giving them more flexibility to deal with the problems they have on a daily basis. So we're always having those conversations on Capitol Hill and at FMCSA. We'll continue to do so. Truck parking is certainly, that's that number one issue, I think, that you guys brought up. So that number one issue for the professional truck driver out there, it certainly becomes our number one issue and one of the things that we need to talk about. Drug and alcohol testing, obviously we still want to go down that road. We've got a proposal on oral fluid testing. We certainly need to get hair testing into the mix, without a doubt, because there's just no room for that on our highways. This becomes one of those issues of what can we do as an industry to make us safer, and that becomes one of those things. So there's a kind of kicking the can and working on a lot of issues right now. It keeps us busy. You think there'd be a summer slowdown? There's not. I've got no time to go get my beach tan or play golf like you guys have, so it just kind of sits there, and I'm working on a daily basis.
Oh, man, well, we love that. Hey, Dave, from the Trucking Association, I want to tell you from trucking companies, from you out there representing truck drivers, hey, we appreciate what you do. It's so important that you continue to do that. You have our support. We need you up there, pressing us along to remind them about what we do, to find ways to make us more efficient, to keep us a little bit safer out there. Hey, keep doing what you're doing, and sincerely, from us to you, we appreciate you and need you doing that every day.
Absolutely. It's only the squeaky wheel truly gets the grease, and as long as you're up there doing the talking and bringing attention to the industry and our trade and what we do out here, it's going to make a difference in the long run. And if you're not up there doing the talk that needs to be talked, they're going to forget about you 100% of the time.
All right. Dave, you got to end us with your name, and you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation, as we celebrate your promotion one more time.
Oh, it's hanging from.
All right, we lost him. He's frozen. You know what? That's how you give a good surprise, when you freeze him. There he is. He's back.
Did you hear us?
I didn't. I froze up. I don't know what happened.
Here, you know what? We're going to do it again.
All right.
Hey, end it with your name. You're watching BCB. Obviously, your new title as we celebrate it right here. One more time. Your new title, and you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
This is Dave Heller, Senior Vice President of Safety and Government Affairs for the Truckload Carriers Association, and you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
All right.
Amazing. Every time. Love you, brother. Thank you. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Well, welcome.